Hey folks, Crimson Blaze here. Welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how I prepare for solo backpacking trips. Now, I get a lot of questions about when I go out on my trips all by myself. Like, is it safe to be out there all alone? What kind of precautions do you take when you go solo backpacking? Is it even fun when you're out there all by yourself? Wouldn't you rather be with a group? And why in the world would you ever want to go out there solo backpacking? Well, I love solo backpacking, and I would say the majority of my trips I am going by myself, specifically my long distance through hikes. So I've hiked the Colorado Trail. I did that over the course of 5 years, kind of 100 miles at a time. I've hiked the JMT. That trail is over 200 miles. I've hiked other long distance trails like the Rim to Rim and the Grand Canyon. I've hiked the Teton Crest Trail, and I made a loop out of that. And that was about a 60 to 70 mile loop. So I have solo backpacked in the deserts of Utah, in the Badlands and Black Hills of South Dakota. I have solo backpacked in the mountains and balds and gorges of North Carolina and all through the Rocky Mountains. So I'm really familiar with solo backpacking and how to prepare for those type of trips. The first thing I'm going to do is research the area that I'm backpacking. Now, I know a lot of people like to be spontaneous and just hit the trail and just go however many miles they want and go where the trail leads them. But I feel like when I am solo backpacking, I need to have a better and more intimate knowledge of that area. And the tool that I use to do that is the Onyx Backcountry. And so what I can do is I can start building out my route. So I'll know what trailhead I start at. I'll know the trailhead where I finish. I'll know the names of the different trails that connect, how many miles I'm going to hike on each of those trails. I'll know the contour of the area where I'm hiking. I'll know the different water sources. I'll know if there's trees in the area where I can pitch my hammock or not. And all this is really helpful just to know the area. Because I think that's important, especially when you're solo backpacking, because what if something were to happen to my map? Generally I use the Onyx Backcountry online app on my phone. But what happens if I lose my phone, right? Maybe my phone has dropped into a creek, which has happened before, and it doesn't work anymore. Or I can't recharge it for whatever reason. I forgot my power bank and my phone is out of juice, and now I can't use my online maps. And maybe I have a backup map, a paper map. Well, what happens if something happens to that? I fall into a creek and it gets wet and it gets destroyed. Whatever. There could be all kinds of things that could happen in terms of you're losing your ability to navigate out there. And if that were to happen, I think it's critically important to understand the area that you're in. And because of that research, I'll intimately know where the trails are at. I will know where the different trail heads are at, where there's water, where there's rivers, creeks and streams, things like that. And I think that's going to help me in case of emergency of getting out of trouble or getting lost if I were to lose my phone or my map or things like that. So that's why I think it's critically important to understand the area that you're going to be backpacking when you go solo backpacking. Now, all that research and planning leads to the second precaution that I take, and that is develop an itinerary. Now, this is pretty standard practice and highly recommended that you create an itinerary for any backpacking trip that you go on and leave it with a family or friend in case something were to happen, right? They would have a general idea of where you're at on the trail. Well, for solo backpacking, I like to create an even more detailed itinerary. So I'll have each day planned out. I'll have things on there like how long it's going to take me to get to the trailhead. What time am I going to get there? What's the name of the trailhead? How many miles am I hiking each day? What are the names of the different trails that I'm going to be hiking? Where am I going to have lunch? Where am I going to camp that night? All these things I put in my itinerary so my wife will have a better understanding of what each day looks like for me on the trail. So in case something happens, she's going to have a more detailed picture of where I should be for any given day. But with all that said, I would say following that itinerary should not be like a hard and fast rule. It's a guide, right? And that's what it's meant to be, because things happen on the trail and sometimes you got to make changes on the fly. So even though I've provided that itinerary, I don't feel like I am beholden to it to every single step and I have to meet it exactly or something's going to go wrong. So for example, I was out on the Colorado Trail and a big snowfall hit one night. Well, that really slowed me down and I was not able to get to my planned trailhead because I had a certain number of days that I need to accomplish the miles and I didn't get it done. So I had to camp in different places and I actually ended in a different place because I don't want to risk myself getting hurt or getting injured just trying to meet my itinerary. That doesn't make any sense. So with all that planning and research and creating my itinerary, that is all great, right? That's really helping prepare for your trip. But this next precaution is really helpful in case something changes or happens on the trail. The third precaution that I take is that I will always, always, always bring a GPS communication device. Now, I'll bring this whether I'm going solo or in a group. I'll bring this on hikes because this piece of gear gives me the greatest peace of mind. And I have the Garmin InReach, the mini, the small one. I don't need a bigger one. I don't use it for navigation. I don't use it for maps. They do have ones that are for that. I use a lot of that on my phone, so I didn't need it in my InReach. But this is just super important, right? So I just talked about, what happens if something happens on the trail, right? Maybe I'm ending at a different trailhead like I did on that Colorado trip on that one day. I didn't get as far as I wanted, but I needed my wife to pick me up at that trailhead. Well, having that Garmin InReach, I can send her text messages. And that is just great. That gives her peace of mind. That gives me peace of mind. And so what we do, I will send her 3 messages a day, right? First thing in the morning, just letting her know, hey, everything's good. I'm hitting the trail. I'll generally text her again sometime during the middle of the day, just letting her know, hey, everything's all right. And when I get into camp, right? When I get into camp that night and set up camp, I let her know that I have arrived. And so every time I send her a text message, it also sends her my location. So she knows exactly where I'm at when I send her those text messages. And that just gives her peace of mind that I'm okay, that I'm not hurt. For me, I love it, specifically when I'm solo backpacking, is what happens if I do get hurt, right? I'm a 52-year-old man. I'm climbing up these mountain passes, going through these slot canyons, and I'm rappelling down, and I love it, right? I love all that. But, what happens if you twist an ankle or just twist your knee or something or fall and, you know, you get hurt or whatever and you can't keep moving? I love the fact that the Garmin InReach allows me to do an SOS. So I can send a text message to a search and rescue team, and they can find me. That gives them my coordinates, and they can come find me. And that gives me peace of mind, especially when I'm out there by myself. So having that Garmin InReach, that's the one piece of gear I will take with me all the time. Like I said, every backpacking trip, every hike, I just think it's that important. Another precaution I think is important to talk about is protection from wildlife and even other humans. And a common question I get when I go solo backpacking is, do I carry a gun? And the answer is no, I don't. I'm not against guns. I own guns. I've just never felt a need to carry a gun in all of my years of backpacking. But if you are considering carrying a gun, there are a few things that I would recommend. One, know the regulations for carrying a weapon in the area that you're backpacking. And I say weapons because it's more than just guns. So when I was hiking the JMT, I learned that bear spray was considered a weapon. So make sure you know what the regulations are and be compliant in the area that you're backpacking. Two, like all the gear you carry, make sure that you know how to use it, that you've practiced with it, and that you've trained with it prior to going out on your trip. Third, make sure that you have a gun that's powerful enough to handle a large grizzly bear, because something like a 22 is just going to tick it off. And finally, I recommend using a chest harness, because if you're coming around the corner and you encounter a grizzly bear, she ain't gonna wait for you to get the gun that may be stored in your backpack or your back pouch or even your side pockets. You need to be able to access that gun quickly in case you have to use it. So I'm not recommending that you take a gun when you go solo backpacking, but if you do, please take these precautions. As for me and what I do to protect myself on the trail, it's pretty simple. If I am in grizzly bear country, then I will carry bear spray. Otherwise, I'm only going to carry a small kind of air horn, or more typically, I'm going to carry an electronic device that's on my shoulder that I can pull that's going to emit a high-pitched noise that's meant to deter animals. And really, that's it. I guess I do have my trekking pole as kind of a last resort if I'm attacked by an animal. But really, that's all that I take when I'm on the trail. Now, I do think it is a good idea to be well versed in how you need to handle yourself if you encounter wildlife. So things that you probably heard is, make yourself look big, don't turn your back on the animals, never run away from an animal. They'll think that you're prey and they will hunt you down. And most importantly, and I think this is the hardest thing, is that you need to remain calm. You need to project strength so the animal does not see you as prey. Also know that animals are most active during dusk and dawn. So if you're nervous about that, then just avoid hiking during these periods of time. And maybe I just have a false sense of security because I'm 6 foot, 200 pounds. I've never felt threatened by other hikers or even wildlife. I know that attacks from humans and wildlife on the trail are pretty rare, but they do happen. But a lot of bad things can happen when you're on the trail, whether you're solo backpacking or in a group. And I'm just not one who wants to pack my fears. Otherwise, I would be packing 60, 70 pounds of gear, and that's not going to be any fun. But I'm not a 5'4", 125-pound woman out there solo backpacking. I'm sure that they have a different perspective of what they need to do to make themselves feel safe on the trail. So for all you female backpackers who want to go solo backpacking, I would recommend checking out the YouTube channel of Hungry Hiker. She's an experienced backpacker that I've watched a lot of her trip videos, and I've seen that she has a video out there about solo backpacking for women. And I'm sure she has some really good advice from a female's point of view of what she does to keep safe out on the trail. As for me, I would recommend bring along the protection that's going to make you feel safe. Know the regulations of the area you're backpacking, and just know how to use whatever it is that you're going to carry with you on your trip. A few other safety tips that I recommend if you're going to go solo backpacking is one, bring a map and compass, right? I know most people are using online maps. I do. I use that almost exclusively, right? I use the Onyx Backcountry app and I love it, right? You can download those offline maps and you can see exactly where you're at on the trail, what direction you're pointing. But having a backup map and compass is just going to help you feel more comfortable out there on the trail in case something that does happen, that you can be prepared and know how to get out. So definitely recommend bringing a map and a compass as a backup when you're doing these solo backpacking trips. The second thing I would recommend is hike popular trails, especially if you're new to backpacking or just backpacking by yourself. Hike popular trails where there's going to be a lot of people. I was out at the Grand Canyon one year. I was doing the Thunder River Deer Creek Loop, and I blacked out. I was down in the canyon floor. I was hiking up the switchbacks. It was about 110 degrees, I think, and I just fell to the side and blacked out. Well, because this is such a popular trail, somebody came up right beside me a few minutes later and just made sure that I was okay. Gave me some electrolytes, some food, some bandaging, and just made sure that I was okay. Checked my mental capacity to be able to get out, and that's comforting. So if you're solo backpacking for the first time, hike a popular trail, but there's going to be other people, and you're not really alone all by yourself. Another thing I would recommend is know your limitations, your physical and emotional limitations in terms of how many miles you can hike each day. What's the terrain like? Are you hiking over rugged mountain passes? Are you dropping down into steep slot canyons? Right? There's all kinds of precautions that you have to take. With mountain passes, is there lightning that you could get struck? Slot canyons, if there's rain, then you can drown in a flash flood. All these things that you need to be prepared for. So you need to physically be ready to be able to hike the miles that you're going to hike and in the temperature that you're going to expecting to hike, as well as mentally understand some of the things. Are you hiking along a ledge with a 500-foot drop? Are you okay with that? Are you okay with rappelling down or rappelling up or bouldering, things like that? These are the things that are just going to help you be safe out on the trail. And that's what the precautions are as you're solo backpacking. When you're out there by yourself, you want to be as safe as possible. So knowing your limitations, your physical and your mental limitations, that's going to help keep you safe out on the trail. Those are the safety tips that I follow when I'm planning a solo backpacking trip. But these are tips that you should follow whether you're backpacking by yourself or in a group. I just think when you're solo backpacking, it just becomes critically more important to prepare and plan for your trip in case an emergency happens. Now, I do enjoy backpacking with others. I backpack with my wife at least once a year, and that's really special. I backpack with my son once or twice a year, and I really love that. I backpack with co-workers as well as folks from my church, and I enjoy those trips. But I really love solo backpacking. And maybe it's because, as my wife calls me, a social introvert, is that I don't mind being alone. Like, I enjoy people, I enjoy having conversation with people. I do enjoy that, but I don't mind being alone. And that's part of the solo backpacking that I like. I like the no noise aspect of it. When I'm hiking, I don't want to necessarily be in a conversation. There's a phrase I hear, you either like the hiking or the camping part better for backpacking. And for me, I like the hiking part over the camping. Now I like camping, but typically my days are hiking big miles. I want to see the big views. I want to have the experience. I want to have the physical exertion. By the time I get to camp, I'm ready to eat my ramen, go to bed, wake up, and do it the next day. Where other folks are more inclined to, well, they want the camping version. Maybe they don't hike as many miles. They want to camp in a spot, stay there for a couple of days, and just enjoy that spot. And I would say, if you're more on the camping side and you want that social interaction, then solo backpacking may not be for you. I do think it is safer to hike with somebody, to be in a group. I think that's obvious, but I don't think solo backpacking is unsafe. And hopefully some of these precautions, some of these safety tips will help you prepare for your next solo backpacking trip. All right, folks, thanks for watching. Until my next adventure, keep on blazing.